Support for CFO Thought Leader comes from Ledge and US Bank.
Hi, it's Craig Wirt, the CFO of Jobber, and you are listening to the CFO Thought Leader podcast.
This is episode 1057.
What we realize, in order for us to stay successful and to survive, we also need to create the near-term revenues and actually diversify our business and de-risk the business. And together with the rest of the management team, we actually changed the narrative of the company. And that's why now we talk not just about our two main products, but about component parts. So we started supplying components, not for the retrofit for the existing aircraft, which was our initial model, but for the rotorcraft producers, helicopter producers, to the battery electric players, which in effect before were our competitors, to drone specialists, even to the US Army, so which wasn't a part of the story before. So I think the short answer is yes, Jack. So we had to adapt to the markets and change the story and change the actual story of the company.
Hi, it's Jack. On today's episode, we speak with Georgy Egorov, CFO of ZeroAvia. Maybe it was a little bit of beginner's luck, Georgy Egorov tells us, reflecting on his early days as a CFO of a biotech startup. At the time, the life sciences company was using knowledge-driven resources and AI to revolutionize drug discovery. Yet Egorov recognized a huge vulnerability. He discovered the company's business model relied on too few customers, making growth overly dependent on external decision makers. From this realization came a pivotal shift. Going forward, the management team would broaden the company's client base, refine strategic narratives, and cultivate a more stable, scalable revenue foundation. You'll hear that story and much more on today's episode. We'll begin after this. Are you tired of manual, fragmented, and time-consuming expense management processes? Then the US Bank Commercial Rewards Card might be right for your business. More than just a card, it's an all-in-one card, expense, and travel management solution that replaces outdated expense management methods with a single intuitive platform. Specifically designed to scale with your growing business, it provides the control and real-time insights into spend that you need. It integrates with your existing tools, lets you set custom spend policies, captures all expenses automatically, and liability is kept at the corporate level. Employees can even book travel right in the platform. You also get to choose your rewards, either points or rebates, all while saving money with no annual fee. So why wait? Manage your cash flow better and streamline your business operations today with the US Bank Commercial Rewards Card. Visit usbank.com/CFO to learn more. Hello, we're speaking with Georgy Egorov, CFO of ZeroAvia. Georgy, welcome.
Thanks so much, Jack. I'm delighted to be here.
As always, Georgy, we're going to ask you to look back for us, and you have a very interesting background, so I think our listeners will enjoy this. Go back in time for us and identify what you believe were the experiences that prepared you for finance leadership. What would those be?
You know, when people ask me about how you as a CFO, I think, and I don't want to create unnecessary visual associations, but I see myself as a bit of a triangle of experiences. But first of all, as you know, I come from investment banking. I think it was about my most formative experience. So in total, I spent 17 years. And I think the industry teaches you a lot of different things. It's a fast-paced environment. You learn to see a big picture. You face problems all the time, and just the nature of the sector. And you also learn to solve these problems so very quickly. And also, by the way, there's a reason why investment banking is called sell side. It's you need to know how to find ways to sell your business or how to change that story. So I think that experience was quite fundamental for me, and I think that were really roots of my career as a CFO. However, I've got also two other angles in the triangle. One is actually I started my career in Price Waterhouse, so back then, so now it's PwC. And my first 2 years was audit, which is almost was an opposite spectrum of finance. So it's actually extremely detail oriented. I was very junior, obviously, it was my first job. And then you almost don't look to see the big picture, but you look at the details ultimately, and then you try to see the inconsistencies. So creating a bit of a pattern if you want. And yeah, and the third angle, it's I was a first time CFO. So had to start pretty much from scratch in my two startups and establish infrastructure, do the first audit, hire people, set up the finance strategy. And I think it's also kind of became a fundamental side of my CFO being. By the way, there's also a flip side of that, because ultimately for a couple of times I didn't have a proper CFO mentor. So a lot of things actually I have to find the solutions myself. Does this make sense?
Would you mind if I spotlight a little more of your early years? You studied in The Hague originally at a science university. Is that right?
That is.
Like you mentioned, you are, when you're with Price Waterhouse, you're with an office in Moscow.
That's right.
And ultimately, when you I think you enter industry for the first time, you jump to London. Did you make that happen? How do you go from Moscow to London?
Oh, I might hijack the whole podcast for this, but in a nutshell, so not to spend too much time. So I went to The Hague. It was exchange program with my Moscow University. So really, and actually it was my first time being abroad. So I was 20 years old. So as you can imagine, the wild 90s in Russia. So the Soviet Union collapsed only 6 years before that. So I moved to The Hague and I realized, wow, actually the Western Europe is an amazing place to live. And the Netherlands in themselves were quite an exciting place. So made lots of friends, Americans, Canadians, the Europeans. So then afterwards, I decided to go back to Russia to finish my university over there, studied in Price Waterhouse. But then it didn't really click with me because I thought audit was great. And at the same time, I just did not feel like maybe it was real me. So, and then you also remember it was end of 90s. So ultimately the word of the day was investment banking. So it was just right around the tech boom. So I started carpet bombing, the investment banks in London and ended up in London. And there was a bit of a story actually. So I went to London to do interviews on my tourist visa with $300 in the pocket. So I had only 2 weeks to find a job, which I did.
And what do you step into? It's an FP&A role. Who hires you?
Yeah, so the first banking job was European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which is it's the analog of the World Bank. Obviously you've got one in DC. So it's development bank which was created to transition the Eastern European economies towards market economies. And my first role was it was middle office if you want. So it was the strategy and planning and portfolio management role, which actually also kind of was a great way to look at the business from inside out and trying to see, okay, which projects work well, which projects don't work, and actually build the longer story for a bank.
It would seem like you're pretty acquainted with that world. I'm trying to think about, compare you to any auditor from Price Waterhouse who wanted to get into investment banking. Your story's a lot more complex than that, but the fact is you do it. And so you step into that first position. After 4 years, you're at Goldman Sachs, where you invest 6 years of your time. But it seems like you knew exactly what you wanted to do. There was no hesitation. Investment banking, how do I get there? Correct me, please.
You know what, like looking back, I think I knew, or maybe actually the other way around. Back then, maybe I thought I knew what I was doing because ultimately I thought, okay, so there's a clear career path. I started in Big Six back then, Big Four now, which was a great, foundation for my finance career. Then I moved to something in banking, but it wasn't the front-facing job. There wasn't the front office. And I really, really wanted to be, working with clients. I wanted to do capital markets. Well, if I look back, I also realized I knew very little about the true investment banking before joining Goldman. And Goldman for me was really, I think that's the most formative organization for me. I think I learned so much over there and had a tremendous time. And I still actually friends with a lot my mentors, by the way, and actually with a lot of people I studied with over there. So my analyst class of 2001. So we're still, pretty close to a lot of to a lot of us.
What happens exactly? And again, if you wouldn't mind, let me zero in here. The person that joins Goldman Sachs versus 6 years later, the person who exits Goldman Sachs. As far as your business mind, your financial mind is concerned, what's happened to you?
Well, another great question. So I actually really, really love Goldman, and I think the culture of the company really appealed to me, and it still does. So obviously the organization, I'm sure has evolved as well. However, what I felt, and I don't know it was justifiably or not, but I felt I was a little bit pigeonholed in Goldman. So obviously I'm a Russian speaker, so I was mostly working with the Russian speaking clients, and I felt there was a little bit of a limiting factor. And my boss at the time and that people around me saying, no, look, stay, also because ultimately what you do is a big geography, it's a big market, and you can make yourself a name out of it. But when UBS offered me a role, they offered me something much larger. So they offered me to cover around 40 countries. And back then, I don't know whether I was a bit naive or not, but I think the decision was right at the end because, we all know where Russia is right now. And I think ultimately it was a very difficult move because I said, Goldman for me is the most formative company I work for, most formative organization. But I was really wanted to step out of my comfort zone. And that's what UBS really gave me.
Yeah, so Goldman turns you into an investment banker, and UBS allowed you to pursue the types of deals that really interested you. It was a little limiting at Goldman. At the same time, you called it the most formative chapter. And again, I'm trying to figure out, well, what happened? And I think it was just the load of experiences that came your way, and you got to understand how deal-making, investments, and all of that was made. How am I doing? Am I close? What formative? Why was it formative for you?
You're very close, but there's a much bigger factor there. So I still believe, and again, maybe obviously I was much younger when I started in Goldman than when I joined in UBS. Goldman has got maybe the strongest culture on the street. And then the principles which they follow, don't ask me to quote them now, but number one, so first of all, it's all about team. Then it's never I, it's we. And I think it resonated so much with me. And I really, really believe, so I don't know how they managed to create it. No, I don't know. It's the self-preservation maybe somehow, because the bank never had a big balance sheet, so it had to compete with much bigger banks, with, JP Morgans and Citis and UBSs of this world. But it also, another one was the quality of people. I still believe that whatever the company does, whatever the bank does in hiring people, they manage to attract so much talent. And these people were really just amazing to work with. So it's not just about the whole growth of, okay, so I joined as a little analyst and, left as the executive director, and what they explained me how investment banking works, not the deal experience, but actually the sheer, the pillars of I think maybe even financial integrity or maybe professional integrity. And it's the people and the culture.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Emerging markets. And again, you moved to UBS, another sizable investment, 7 years. But it seems like here's where you get into the lane that you enjoy, those emerging markets, those new opportunities coming out of other parts of the world. I don't know. Share with us why, 7-year investment.
Interesting. Like you say, it's almost a very long period of time. Equally, a lot of people will say, no, look, no, it's nothing. So, it was amazing because, so first of all, so covering this massive geography, so around 45 markets. Yeah. So from, Poland, Hungary, the Russian-speaking world, Kazakhstan, Turkey, Israel, part of Africa. That was amazing. So first of all, the sheer diversity of the people, of the sectors, of the deals, and also knowledge the markets. Yeah, because ultimately I was a capital markets banker, so I had to understand what markets, how these markets particularly work, what's investor interest, what investors would buy, what deals they would want us to bring. So, but it's also another thing which really, really was interesting. It's I finally started working on different industries as well. And I think, if anything, what my position in UBS gave me, it's a big exposure on tech sectors, for example, because obviously, as you can imagine, so 2010s, a lot of innovation comes out from emerging markets as well. So, Israel, Central Europe, and many other regions. And that was really interesting journey. So don't remember how many deals I did, but it was a sheer variety. It was amazing. Equally, by the way, Jack, it was the flip side was that I lived on a plane. I took around, so 2-3 flights a week. So, up to 150 flights a week.
And how many years was that common? Was that the last 3 years, or you were?
No, the entire time, the entire 7 years. Yeah.
No kidding. No kidding. Wow. So you you had a few miles behind you. So when it does come time, and again, I want to mention to the audience that you've had 3 CFO chapters now. Let's call them that. Yeah. You're in your 3rd CFO chapter. When it does come time to step into industry, I believe you go into biotech. Mm-hmm. Tell us something about that decision and whether it was going to, initially your thoughts were, yes, I enjoyed biotech, or did it matter?
Yeah, the first one was actually slightly broad. I think, a company called Exscientia, which was just acquired by Recursion from Salt Lake City. So now it's a transatlantic AI drug discovery giant.
Yep.
It was very interesting. So I'll tell you very honestly, I knew very little about biotech. Or actually, they call themselves right now tech bio. We called them pharma tech at that point of time. So it's the drug discovery with the help of AI, of machine learning. So I knew very little. I had a few other offers, and I think, okay, what's the easy to understand? Most likely fintech. Yeah. And by stroke of a genius, I did text a friend of mine who, at that point of time, he's still actually based in California, and finished, did PhD from UCLA in biochemistry. And I asked him, look, mate, do you know this company, Exscientia? And if you know, what do you know about them? And I think I still keep this text message somewhere. He said something like, mate, they're the best AI drug discovery company in the world. Everyone wants to be like them. And we're like, okay, that's good enough for me. So I came there as a kind of clean slate. I had no idea much. Okay, obviously I've got my school level of knowledge of chemistry and biology, but it was a very steep learning journey at Accenture.
When you, and it was 2 years there, there's a transaction while you're there, or no?
I did. So first of all, and I'm going to tell you this a bit later in the story, because there was one of those fundamental moments actually of, for me at least, what it means to be a good CFO. And I think this will be a great time to talk about later. But together with the management team, with the CEO, chairman, and chief commercial officer, with whom we're all still very good friends, we changed the strategy of the company, and, the transaction was there. So 3 fundraisings, B, C, and D.
Okay. Wow. Let me just ask then, when you do leave UBS, is it the travel? Is it, what makes you finally say, okay, I'm looking for a CFO opportunity. I'd like to step off of, what was involved in your decision-making?
So, it's always so kind of easy to look at it from the, from the current time into the back, saying, or maybe not easy. Actually, you start doubting, why did I do that decision? But at that point of time, actually, it was all very clean in my head, and to no extent I regret. UBS was great experience, but looking back, actually, I'm thinking, well, actually, what I thought would happen, I don't think I was right. I think there were 2 sides. So first, I felt a little bit burnout, this proverbial investment banking burnout. So as I said, I was flying so much. I felt like I leave on a plane, and when I come back home on Friday, I just don't have any energy for my personal life. I don't have any energy to go on dates or meet friends, meet family. And I felt, okay, something needs to change. Yeah. On the other side, and as I mentioned few minutes earlier, UBS gave me massive exposure on a lot of interesting sectors, be it new consumer sectors or tech sectors. And what I realized, I really loved working with tech companies, especially innovative companies. But as you can imagine, UBS was very transactional experience, because at that point of time, I was head of emerging markets, equity capital markets. So my task was to bring companies public, or to make companies go public and to list them on exchanges. And what I realized is the whole process was so enjoyable, but I also felt like a foster mother a little bit. So you would win a mandate, then you start working with this amazing tech company for 6 to, 9 months. You do the deal, you list them on NASDAQ, New York Stock Exchange, or London. And afterwards, you have to give up this child and then see on sidelines how they grow subsequently. And I thought, and after I've done a few deals like this with some of the amazing tech companies, I thought, actually, I want to be part of this journey. Not only I want to take this public, I want to grow them, take them public, and then hopefully help continue them grow.
Oh, yeah. You got attached to some of the companies. You got involved with you got to know the management. Maybe you instilled that you experienced that and it's coming from the companies you're serving rather than the mothership sometimes. We will have a few more career-related questions for you, but that was just a really nice overview for us. Thank you for that. And right now, we want to find out about ZeroAvia. Tell us about this company. It's climate tech. Interestingly, we had a climate tech hydrogen company on recently. So we're beginning to learn a little more about this space. But as it applies to air travel, fascinating. Tell us about this company. What's it about?
Sure, of course. And by the way, actually, since your previous question was about my flying and the miles, I think one of the reasons why I decided to be closer to, or decided to be in climate tech after biotech, is actually maybe it's a bit of a repentance from my 150 flights a year. So,
yes.
And so philosophy side. So at ZeroAvia, we want to see ourselves as the true pioneers of the clean aviation. In 2017, when the company was founded, we spotted that among all industries emitting CO2 emissions, aviation perhaps remained the least disrupted from the climate change perspective, and most likely the industry which would continue to generate most of the CO2 emissions. And the reasons for that, it's quite straightforward. So first of all, people, continue to fly. They want to fly more, so there's an increased propensity of flying, and there's a total lack of disruption in the aviation industry. Come think about this. So we still fly on the technologies which were largely developed in 1960s, which is mind-boggling, given the amount of progress which happened. So we analyzed a lot of solutions and came to the conclusion that the hydrogen electric engines are the most scalable solutions to decarbonize aviation. Our mission is to enable the clean future of flight and to deliver the truly zero emission free aviation as early as 2026. With this regard, hydrogen electric engines are the most practical, economical, and the most suited for our mission. So the way how hydrogen electric engine works is pretty straightforward. You store hydrogen on board, either gaseous or liquefied form. Then it gets injected into the fuel cells, and the results, which results in two byproducts, water and electricity, which in turn powers the electric propulsion. So it's really a clean solution for the aviation. We don't claim that we invented the technology ourselves, but we really perfected it to such a level that we created the portfolio, which is very difficult to replicate, and that's why we believe that we are one of the leaders of clean aviation. And also, lastly, with the time, like many pioneers, we have become much more than just a hydrogen electric company. Our component parts, like fuel cells or our motors, can be used in other modalities of clean aviation, like battery electric or drones or rotorcrafts and so forth. So we became much more than that, and we're hoping to use our technologies in many applications as well.
Were you the first CFO of the company? Was it the founders and you stepped into this, or was it much more established?
That was actually my first time when I wasn't the first CFO. There was a first-time CFO who did a great job in establishing the foundation for the finance function.
So when you arrived, you come in as sort of a chief investment officer, and you do that tour of duty for a short while, and then you step into the CFO role. I think I have that right.
That's right.
And can you tell us, is there a part of the story as you come in and you're talking to investors, and you hear you have the opportunity to sort of begin telling the story maybe a little differently. Was there part of it you thought the investment world needed to be educated better about, that you perhaps could raise the volume there? What would you tell us?
Sure. Oh, that's very interesting, because obviously the whole industry has changed as well. Together with the rest of the management, we did change the story of the company, and I think it comes from a couple of points. So first of all, the fundraising environment, as you well know, has changed dramatically. Yeah. So with the high interest rates, it's so much more difficult for private companies to raise capital, and therefore I think we had to adjust. And the biggest adjustment was that before we were just talking about two products. Our two engines, one for small aircraft, which we call ZA600, 600 kilowatt. Another one was ZA2000, 2 megawatt engine for the larger aircraft. But if you look at the development, because it's certification, it's a new technology, it takes a lot of time to certify. And therefore, what we realize, in order for us to stay successful and to survive, we also need to create the near-term revenues and actually diversify our business and de-risk the business. And together with the rest of the management team, we actually changed the narrative of the company. And that's why now we talk not just about our two main products, but about component parts. So we started supplying components, not for the retrofit for the existing aircraft, which was our initial model, but for the rotorcraft producers, helicopter producers, to the battery electric players, which in effect before were our competitors, to drone specialists, even to the US Army, so which wasn't a part of the story before. So I think the short answer is yes, Jack. So we had to adapt to the markets and change the story and change the actual story of the company.
Tell us something about your team today and the finance function. There are certain priorities that you have that other types of companies don't. So therefore, the people you count on might be different. Can you give us a sense of the team and how you organized it?
Absolutely. Actually, and I think it's very interesting, my predecessor did an amazing job of putting together an amazing team. In fact, I didn't change a single person in the team. So only one person left, but was substituted with another ex-Goldmanite, which I'm very happy about. Overall, I think what I've noticed was very interesting. So I didn't have, as I mentioned to you, so I didn't have to change the team or the team members, but I had to change the attitude or mentality of people around. I think what was happening that apart from fundraising, I don't think my colleagues assigned much value or importance to finance and perhaps associated them with bureaucracy. So my task number one when I became a CFO was to change this perception and to make sure that everyone sees finance as enablers of the business plan, enablers of activity, of a strategy. Even each individual engineer had to understand the value of finance, that we enabling his or her activities and what he or she wants to deliver. And I think once it's changed, once the finance team has become empowered, I think it started working as a proverbial well-oiled machine. So I think now we have maybe one of the best FP&A functions, at least I definitely seen, and many investors seen, and we've got great investors who can judge. We understand the profitability of our products much better. We understand profitability drivers, fixed a few previous errors in ESOPs, in taxes. And so importantly, with the help of finance, we managed to make the entire company more agile and more results-oriented.
Georgy, I want to, as you just described, you worked at convincing your colleagues, the larger company, that finance was an enabler. And, we hear that frequently. People say that. But it really comes down to your, and I believe this, your emotional intelligence as a leader. You got to get invited to certain meetings and make impression on people and change a negative, what might be perceived as a negative, or certainly. And I mean, that's it. I just see Georgy the Budinsky, who tries to, come in and weigh in on certain subjects that finance doesn't. Why is finance here? I mean, this is the challenge that finance leaders face as they try to awaken people to the real value that finance can bring. How do you do that? How do you operate? And again, I think you gave us one of the keys. which was from your Goldman tenure, or at least I'll build your narrative here. It's we. It's not, I need to be part of the team too, folks. How am I doing? Am I close to whatever's transpired over the last 2 years? I don't know. Yeah.
Very. You obviously you're very close, and I think there's a multitude of factors. So first of all, I have to credit my boss, the CEO of the company, Val. I think he embraced my knowledge, my experience, and what I can bring to the company, and I think he did it very quickly. So, I'm not going to speak for him, but also the entire executive team ultimately realized that a lot of things that they can learn. I think maybe it's a culture of the company allowed this. Then number two, so when I joined ZeroAvia 2 years ago, so it was right that we launched the funding round, and then ultimately that funding round was a little bit of a what do you call it, the baptism by fire, whatever the expression, because ultimately then you start talking to investors and you start looking at it from a different angle of the new CFO of the company, and we realized actually we were not that good in forecasting. We were way more aggressive and optimistic about what investors think about us. And I think ultimately, I don't want to say that I pointed the mistakes. I think the entire executive team learned on these mistakes, which resulted in a bigger thing, the acceptance of me as a finance leader, but also importantly of the entire team of finance as someone who can actually bring a lot of value and not just help there to do the fundraising.
Did you feel as if you had visibility, all the visibility you needed into the business? Again, as you said, you were optimistic in some of the forecasts. So was it that some of the indications, the data, whatever you have to look into the business was in some ways not accurate, or what would you tell us?
Yeah, I think, amazing question, by the way. It's actually, which also makes me pause quite often, even in the meantime, and on my daily job, thinking, do I understand everything? Of course not. Yeah. So I think ultimately it's the you constantly learn and you constantly adapt. But what I had to do is first of all is to roll up my sleeves and then really dig deep into the model. What do we show to investors? What do we show out internally? What do we show to the board? Yeah. Then, for example, I realized that the model which we had was really a little bit of a top-down model, most likely created by bankers and not by the company, which understands the value drivers of its own business. Once you understand the value drivers, then you start digging deeper. So, for example, we obviously R&D company, we're engineering company. So what costs are there? So then you start looking at whether personnel costs are correct. So whether we establish PMO function correctly. On the back of the output from finance, we changed the PMO function, completely strengthened it. So had to change the people. Now the chief strategy officer of the company overlooks that because we realized that's most likely one of the most important functions. Then I also realized at some point of time when during the finally quarterly performance we started doing, and we're religious about this right now, is actually we completely mispriced our contracts with some of our clients. So I think it's the learn, by mistake or by experience, and I'm sure there'll be many other things. But if you ask me, if you put me against the wall and say, okay, well, what was that thing which actually made you think so or made you check? I think it just kind of really go into the detail and rolling up your sleeves and saying, okay, what does drive this business? What are the drivers?
Yeah. What are the drivers? Let's identify them. And this is shared learning. This isn't finance coming down.
Yeah,
this is shared learning that we're all finding it, discovering together. I want to touch on AI with you. Tell us the relationship with AI and this opportunity you're pursuing. Has it leveraged it already? Is it a big part of its DNA? What would you tell us?
For me personally, by the way, I'm a little bit taken aback sometimes with the I guess it's a second wave of AI right now. So I think maybe it's absolutely not. So obviously, as a reminder, my first startup was, as I mentioned, AI drug discovery company, and I think one of the most advanced at that point of time. So for us in Accenture, AI was always an enabler. It's like electricity, right? So it's given that it will be used. So no one talks about electricity. So I'm pretty sure in 5 years' time, no one will be talking about the AI because it will be embedded in most of the processes. So without much say. So As I mentioned, everyone will be using AI or machine learning. Equally, I don't think alone, by the way, it will be enough to create a competitive moat or strategic moat. So, for example, in Accenture, despite the fact that AI was a core product, we realized very early it will be replicated everywhere. So we had to create another mode. Another mode was data, in fact. But I'm coming back closer to ZeroAvia. I think for us, what I expect that AI should should lower the costs and increase the efficiency. So I can give you a few examples where we started using it and where we're betting big on AI. Like most of engineering businesses, we're a mixture of hardware and software. So first of all, we already have an AI product. We call it Smart Hydrogen offering. So what do we do? For example, we work with the suppliers of hydrogen to our future customers, to ourselves, and help them with the help of our AI algorithm or machine learning algorithm to lower the cost of production of hydrogen. And we achieve around 20% savings, which is amazing because especially it works well in the US, where the electricity prices in the grid are volatile. And then depending on the day, so for example, in California, the difference between the nighttime electricity prices and the peak noontime, especially in summer when there's plenty of solar, it's quite immense. So so we already use AI to help generate lower price for hydrogen production. So where we also started using AI is in software engineering, so anything related with coding. So I think there are plenty of usage over there. However, the biggest game changer for us will be AI as part of the engine maintenance. Just as a reminder, our business model is not just to sell the engines to airlines or the operators, but then to do the maintenance of these engines on the power by the hour model, i.e. for each hour of flight, the operator pays us money and then pays us fee, and then we serve it for next 10, 15 years. And the game changer for us will be to ensure that AI can predict or predictive elements of the of engines performance. If AI will help us to understand how the engine performs and whether a particular engine needs some maintenance, for us it will be a game changer. So then we'll be able to lower the cost and increase efficiency. So that's for us. So in short, so we already use it in many other applications. So hydrogen production, software engineering. Actually, we even use it in NetSuite for the invoice recognition. But the big thing is engine maintenance.
What would you tell us about as far as your forecasting capability? Is it contributing in any way to your forecasting already? Do you expect it to in the future?
I'll be absolutely frank. For now, no. And the reason for that, because I think it will be much more useful factor when we start producing engines and start producing in bulk. Then ultimately we will have to be a bit more modular about when the demand will come, what's going to be the maintenance, especially when what I mentioned right now, how much revenue we will receive from the maintenance of the engine, so how much cost will be spent. As of now, I think our business is a little bit more granular. So it's all about the R&D cost and ultimately personnel costs, so which are quite difficult to use AI in forecasting.
Nice. Well, thank you. Thank you for that, Georgy. We're up to our finance strategic moment where we'd love to have you share, a moment of strategic insight or change that you experienced along the way. And again, it might have happened last week or it might have been 20 years ago. What comes to mind when we ask for a finance strategic moment?
So I think I have a couple of moments, and I'm not sure you would call either of them eureka moment, but I don't know what luckily or unfortunately, I don't know, but I guess fortunately that this moment happened in my first startup. So as we discussed, so I joined Accenture already almost 7 years ago, and AI drug discovery business, and the main business model of that company was to create a machine learning algorithm and help big pharma companies to create new medicine, to create new drugs, cheaper, faster. Yeah, so that was the proposition. It all worked very, very well. But when I joined, I realized, okay, how come that my brilliant colleagues, and most of them were PhDs from great universities, how come they were doing this for 6 years and the still traction was extremely, extremely limited? So and then they were still very much saying, no, that's the way to go. So we can still pharma are our big customers and so forth. And I think the eureka moment came from the standpoint. So once I decided to create the first corporate model, I started going through the drivers of the business. I said, okay, how many pharmaceutical companies are there? 30. Yeah, the big pharma. How many of them wants to use AI and have it as part of the offering? Maybe 25 of them. How many of them will be doing this internally? And then ultimately started kind of dissecting one after the other. And then the last question was, by the way, how many big pharma companies will use us against of the competitors? And what we realized from this kind of a big model which we built, thinking it's going to bring us billions and billions of dollars of revenue, suddenly once you put it all together and look at it through the prism of value creation, we realize actually this model will be extremely, extremely difficult to implement. Extremely. Because you rely on a handful of pharma companies, and if one of them says, no, guys, I found someone better, or I will be doing it externally, or I will be doing it internally, suddenly your entire business model crashes. And I think for me and for my colleagues, there was this amazing thought that how come that we were sitting on this for 6 years, thinking that actually it can work. But once you look at it through the prism of value creation, of the finance mind, by the way, mind you, I didn't understand much in biology or chemistry or in biotech at that point of time. So maybe it was a little bit of a, beginner's luck. So in fact, we had to get together with the CEO, chairman, chief commercial officer of the company to go to the offsite and realize, okay, what we're going to do, and came up with a completely different model.
So what happens? What's the end chapter here?
So, and what happened was very straightforward. Suddenly there was a massive turnaround of the company from investor perception, and I think overall from the internal work. So we changed the strategy, we changed the narrative, and then right away we managed to raise significant funding round and establish the core and establish the foundation for the IPO. So at the end of the day, and also, by the way, to some extent, we created almost a new subsector. So not just being a software as a service company, but trying to create a new tech bio company, which ultimately meaning the creating of JVs between AI companies and the biotechnologies with interesting ideas, and setting new form of business, new form of the AI drug discovery.
You know the feeling. A report deadline is looming, and your team is buried in spreadsheets with tasks like bank and payment processor reconciliations, journal entry prep, and cash flow reporting. But what if there was a better way? Ledge automates the tedious work that slows your team down, like high-volume transaction matching, journal entry creation, and even cash flow forecasting. Ledge glues all of your financial data together across your ERP, banks, payment processors, data warehouse, and more, and automates any workflow, no matter how complex or unique to your business. Get real-time cash flow visibility and make cash reporting and forecasting effortless while increasing controls and accuracy. And Ledge requires no IT or R&D resources. Ledge plugs right into your existing stack, so you can get set up in just a few hours. Imagine a world where your team can close the books faster with fewer resources. Imagine audit-ready data all year round. With Ledge, you can finally stop scaling headcount just to keep up with growth. Visit ledge.co, that's ledge.co, to learn more about how you can automate your finance operations without the heavy lift.
We're going to move to our mentoring round. And actually, this question is sort of in line with that because that was your first CFO tour of duty. We always begin the mentoring round by asking you, when you got into that CFO role for the first time, what is the piece of advice you wish someone gave you? Like there was something you thought you knew the role. You'd sat across the table from so many CFOs, and then you arrive in it, and you're like, why didn't anyone tell me about this? What is that? What is that piece of information? If you could boil things down for us, what is it?
Sure. Interestingly, I don't think it will be any particular finance-related advice or, particular mechanism or particular skill. So, as you know, I came to the CFO world from investment banking, and it was, I'm sure it is still now, but in my days, it was very demanding sector with tough attitude, long hours, competitive environment. So, I thought, what, I'd be different this time as a CFO. I'll try to mellow down. I'll pursue consensus in my decision-making, create a more harmonious environment. And this creation of harmonious environment for me always associated back then with a consensus. So I started kind of doing, okay, you know what, I'm not going to be normal me, hard-headed and, we'll try to say, okay, my way, highway. I will try to do the consensus. And then what I realized in both startups, actually, my startup number 1 and startup number 2. So we started taking consensus decisions at the expense of quality decisions. Especially that was the case in the second one. So I wish someone had told me at the start of my career that consensus is not the best decision, but quite often is the worst decision because no one is right. So I wish someone would have told me, instead of seeking consensus, seek consent. So if someone told me this 6 years later, I think my path of the CFO, by the way, and it's been an amazing path for me, but I actually think maybe it would have been even more productive. And interestingly, by the way, I was at the end, I was told about this. I didn't come to it myself. I was told about this consensus versus consent by my current boss and by the executive coach we hired in ZeroAvia. So, and for me, it was really kind of one of those mind-opening experiences. And how come, I didn't realize that actually, that's not exactly the right way to build businesses. But I think maybe also the time changes a little bit. But for me, it was quite a revelation. So consent versus consensus.
Great. Wonderful takeaway for us. Thank you for that. We like to ask our guests to reflect a little on the personal side for us. Generally, is there something most of your colleagues might not know about you? Something you've led an interesting life, been in all parts of the world. But what is it that most people might not know about you?
I think a lot of people perceive me as a bit of a party boy. Albeit, all this, this is long gone, by the way. Yeah, obviously. But, growing up between Moscow, then Holland, London, and, I spent some decent chunk of my time in New York as well. But actually, in fact, I'm a big history nerd. And I'm not even sure that my family members know about it. So I always have a history book on my bed table. I don't know really what it gives me, perhaps some sense of perspective. And maybe the notion that history repeats itself resonates with me a lot.
Is there a particular century that you've landed in as of late? Is there a particular, where are you, or is it just dependent on the latest book you might be reading? I don't know, but where are you? What century fascinates you as of late?
Sure. So I think now I'm in Renaissance. So Renaissance Italy. So I'm reading the history of Venice, and that's quite a fascinating time.
The Renaissance probably draws more people to history, doesn't it?
Actually, it's the Borgias and the Medicis. And then I have to say, I think, the Prince by Machiavelli, which was obviously written to one of the Medicis, I think that's one of those books which every boy and maybe a girl has to read as well. I think there's a lot of negative notion about that books, and it's very cynical, and the word, obviously, the adjective Machiavellian comes from there. But in fact, actually, I think it's a great book about understanding people's nature, people's behavior. So I would, that definitely was someone for growing up. I wish I would have read that book earlier. But anyway, it also feels very well into my whole Renaissance notion right now, and the Renaissance interest.
Speaking of books, I don't know if there's a business book or another type of book that's influenced your thinking along the way. Is there something that you'd recommend, or a resource perhaps that you've learned from along the way? Anything?
Jack, I'm not going to recommend any finance related books, by the way, any business books. And I think maybe it comes from the fact that my undergrad was in business and economics. Then I tried to write my PhD, was also in economics, and I went to the business school as well, even though, so it was, not directly business related program. So I think it feels to me sometimes that, there's so many interesting books on business, but quite often people repeat the same topic, just different words. So I think I felt like I already exhausted, but I think there are a couple of books I would really recommend to your listeners, and then these books, I think they really changed my life, especially the first one. So number one is Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. So that's the British professor based in University of Berkeley. And ultimately, the notion of the book is more than exercise, diet, and wealth. Science has shown that sleep is the most important factor to our physical and mental. So I was literally, when I was in banking especially, I was one of those proverbial finance people. So I would wake up at 5:30 in the morning, regardless how many hours I slept before. I would go to the gym, I would exercise, and it would be like this vicious circle. So I would be moody the entire day. My energy would be low. My cognitive thinking, actually, I realized at some point of time started failing. And then after reading that book, which really was my opening, I have started prioritizing the quality of sleep, and I think it really changed my life. So it was great. Another book, and I really, really don't want to be controversial over here, and hope you definitely will understand this, and hope your listeners as well. It's actually 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. So political views aside, I think it's a brilliant book, and it can be uniquely applied in the business world. So in the life of any CFO finance executive. So just look at this 12 rules which he's talking about, and then it's so easy to apply them in real life in an entrepreneurial world. So for example, I keep telling to all my colleagues, saying, guys, the rule number one, don't pursue what is meaningful and not what expedient. Because so many people make this mistake. They come to work in the morning, they open their emails, and they start, okay, let me do the small things. I will clean up my email. And then they push back the big things which exactly matter for the performance, for the company, for the team. And there are many other rules from that book which I apply. So I really think it's a brilliant book, which unfortunately got a little bit of a negative rap about it.
Well, it's a good example for us. Thank you for that. We are up to our final question, and Georgy, we've enjoyed this. Hey, one before our final question. Do you miss traveling?
A little, but I've started getting it a bit more again. To be honest, actually, I would. Let's see, you caught me actually over here, because from the normal thing to say, yes, but in fact, actually, quite often, I really love where I live. I live in the beautiful area of London. My office is around the corner, and in any case, we have the hangar in the west of England, which I need to travel, a lot as well. And by the way, now U.S. operations in between California and Washington State. So one way or the other. So I have to travel quite a bit.
Well, thank you for that. We would like to know now, what are your priorities as a CFO for the coming 12 months?
That's easy. So we have put quite ambitious targets in front of ourselves for next year, because the next year is a really pivotal year for us. So we do hope to certify the first product. So we will hopefully be one of the first clean aviation companies with a certified product which can be used and sold. So it's a big target. So therefore, next 12 months is deliver on the targets, and something more financial is to ensure that we have fully funded business plan. So I'm not going to lie that market conditions are quite difficult, and I think about fundraising every day. So yeah, between those two, deliver on the targets and to ensure that we have fully funded business plan.
Georgy Egorov, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a great discussion. Hope your listeners enjoyed it as well.
Hello, everyone. Jack here. Hope you've been enjoying our recent episodes of CFO Thought Leader. Please know that I don't take for granted this opportunity to serve you. Your time is valuable, and of course, so is the time of our CFO guests. I'll admit to you on certain weeks, I will pinch myself and say, hey, I get to do this for a living. I speak to all these impressive leaders. Undoubtedly, there are more aggressive interviewers out there, some who leave no stone unturned. But our swim lane is for finance leaders only. And those finance leaders have a unique style of leadership, one that is rooted in the burden of trust. In light of this, finance leaders must take great care not to forfeit this trust as they step into the role of being a more expressive leader. And that is what CFO Thought Leader is really about. That's why I try to remind myself week in, week out, how fortunate I am. Still, I need your help. Tell us what we're doing right. Tell us what we're doing wrong. Email me your comments at jack@cfothoughtleader.com. And please visit cfothoughtleader.com. You'll find a listener survey right on the nav bar. As always, thank you for listening.